Hello and welcome to This is Property with John Pidgeon and Rachel Kroon. Today we're talking about state tenancy laws, and I know we've spoken about this previously on the show, but I think the landscape keeps changing in this space, and I think depending on which side of the fence you're on, Rachel, as to whether you like them or loathe them as an investor or / landlord or as a tenant. So we want to unpack a little bit of this state by state so that everyone gets a little bit of a bit of love around the country. How's that sound?
Great.
What are your thoughts?
Look, I think landlords are going to be a little concerned about some of the changes, but I think anything that makes it fairer for tenants is also a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. We're all about equality in life, aren't we?
Yeah.
And let's make sure that it is equal. And look, to be honest, nothing's ever equal. But anyway, let's thrash this out. Do you want to start with New South Wales? Well, let's maybe start with some general commentary, because I think there's a few lobbyists out there at the minute that are saying it's unfair for the landlords. It's unfair. They've gone too far. There's too far in the corner of the tenant. If we're staying high level for the minute, there's a housing crisis, and the Australian government, you've brought this on.
Yeah.
Because there's people on the streets that can't get into a house, so that's number one. And then number two, because of the restriction or the small number of available properties for rent, that's doing what? Pushing the rents up. And therefore tenants can't afford to pay the rent. And yeah, there's all this back and forth of, well, you need to fix this, you need to fix that because my tenant, my rent's too high, and it's getting kicked down the road. So depending on which side of the fence we're on as to sort of what we think is fair and reasonable. But I suppose we just wanted to have a chat today and just what we think's fair and reasonable might be different to other people.
Yeah, so I think the most noise is in New South Wales is being made about the no grounds eviction,
Yes.
and possibly the pet rule that's come in that basically says unless you've got a very valid reason, you can't say no to people having pets.
And the wording I think is a little bit grey in the sense that you could have 5 pets.
Yeah.
And the word reasonable is different. Like when I've got a reasonable black knit on versus thinking that, it's a bad example, but like what I think is reasonable, what you think is reasonable can be very different.
100%. I think the phone calls that I've had over the last few weeks talking about this from landlords that are saying their concerns. The pet one is more about, well, I've got this beautiful home that I've recently built and now I can't say no to pets. How is that fair? Like if I've got beautiful hardwood floors in there, why should I not be able to say no? Yeah.
And the pets can't defend themselves today.
They can't.
Or no one can.
And we're pet lovers here.
We are, absolutely. Harry's sitting at home, probably in his nice bed on the deck.
Hank runs our house.
Yeah, that's right. But every situation is different, and it's not just pets. Like kids can ruin the house, adults can ruin the house, anyone can ruin the house. Let's be fair. So I think there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this when we're looking at the tenancy laws. And obviously Victoria had some big changes last year, I believe, started last year. So they were quite dramatic in the changes that were made because they were living in the 1980s in respect to their tenancy laws and standards. So they needed to come up to scratch, but it did take investors a bit of time and cost and effort to be able to bring that up to scratch if you had a older home that you weren't really too concerned about.
Yeah.
So, and then Queensland have had theirs, and New South Wales now are the latest to upgrade, I suppose you want to call that, in respect to the state of housing. But generally speaking, like we're all normal, ethical people here. We want to be able to ensure that people are living in this country in a safe, comfortable environment. So to have locks on doors, windows and heating and cooling, I think is reasonable.
It is reasonable. And I think there were some things that definitely needed to change. Like I've seen some people live in some homes that really should be not deemed livable. And I think that landlords need to be held to account to have a home that is fair and livable.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose the good thing, what I like about it is it's with the property manager. It's their responsibility. So if they're not hitting the standards, they're the ones that are in trouble getting a slap over the wrist, right? And it's not just a slap over the wrist, mind you. If you are managing the property on your own, no property manager, we've always said that that's probably not something that we would encourage.
No.
But you've got to be really careful in this space, don't you? Because it's the buck stops with you.
Yeah, well, my opinion on that is always get a great property manager and let them do their job. I just think that's a non-negotiable for investors. I know some people disagree, but my opinion is have a property manager, let them do their job.
I fast forward to when I'm playing golf 3 days a week and checking in on how things are going in life, and I don't think I'd ever still manage my own property if I had the time. There's just no interest whatsoever because that person, that middle person, that conduit is really important for that separation, not getting emotionally involved between you and the tenant directly.
And if you do something all day, every day, you get pretty good at it. You're less likely to miss things. You're less likely to have, if I was going to, make sure the documentation was correct for any of these things, I'd want to be really good at doing that and know that it's kept to that standard. Because if you have your paperwork for any of these things, if you're going to tribunal and your paperwork's not in order, you're completely thrown out.
Side note, but I think I've had more complaints from people saying their property manager is rubbish than I've ever had.
Yeah, that actually has been a lot of that lately. I have heard that. And just a little one too. I've noticed something that's getting snuck into management agency agreements that I want everyone to look out for, which is we're used to paying a week's rent to our property manager when they're renting out the house. Yeah. There's a new one that's come in where the tenants are re-signing their lease. So the tenants come up for renewal and they're re-signing the lease, that they're taking a week's or half a week's rent.
A reletting fee.
A relet fee rather than, or a renegotiation fee rather than the paperwork fee. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's been in for quite a while. Like I don't know what state, but I remember having seen that for quite some time. Even though the tenant hasn't changed, they're just saying we need to send out some paperwork.
Yeah. So I've seen that in Queensland and New South Wales, and my advice is to read your management agency agreement and negotiate that at the start. I would not be signing a management agency agreement where they're charging a week's or half a week's re-let fee if they're not doing the work.
No, and we're not here to badmouth property managers. So if you're listening out there, then thanks for tuning in first and foremost. But I think there's quality control wherever we go. And everything's a negotiation, isn't it?
Yes,
really?
You've got to negotiate that at the start.
Yeah, and even the percentage, we'd probably say that where like the advertised rate is 8.8%, for example, there's a good chance that you can probably get a percentage off that. Yeah,
and different across states too.
Yeah, the more regional you go, the higher the percentage because the dollar amount is lower,
right.
Isn't it? So,
now tell me what you think about the no grounds eviction change. So no grounds eviction, you now need a valid reason to end a lease. You can't just say you're moving in. You actually have to prove that you did. And renovations, it has to be, you've got to show quotes and things. It's a really big thing. What's your thoughts on the no grounds eviction?
I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's too harsh. And I'm not even speaking from a landlord's perspective. I probably am. But I've coming from a what's fair and reasonable point of view, I don't think a no grounds eviction is the way to solve the issue.
Because traditionally, and it might be something that you've had a client that, not a client, a tenant that, there's not a grounds for eviction, but they're just not a good tenant. There's always mould in the bathroom. There's always, complaints from neighbours, all of those things, nothing to evict. And then it goes on for a little while and you go, I'm just going to give a no grounds eviction.
Yeah, it's not you, it's me.
That.
We need a fresh start.
We need a fresh start. But now that's gone. You don't have the right as the property owner to ask them to leave. No,
that's right. And that's, again, a good property manager And I've always said this, it's like a bad tenant equals a bad property manager equals a bad landlord choosing the wrong property manager.
Yeah.
Who then chooses the wrong tenant, right? Now, say it for what it is. There are great tenants, awesome tenants out there that appreciate the house they're in and treat it as though their own. And there are the opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And as landlords or investors, we hope that we're not going to get the latter. How can we eliminate getting the latter is a good property manager who knows their stuff
100%.
and is very firm, right? It's like buying a good property. A lot of the decisions are made prior to buying it, and you're choosing the right property, you're choosing the right tenant who you've done all the due diligence with and giving you the best chance of having little issues,
Yeah.
right? Now, if you've got a fantastic tenant who does everything as they should do, and you've got an ethical and morally sound investor or landlord, then no grounds of eviction I'm fine with.
Yeah, okay.
Right. It's when you've got the other end of the spectrum, it's like, hang on, my hands are tied here because, as you said, they're not doing anything that's a straight eviction. They're not breaking the rules, but it's just they're pushing the envelope in all shapes and sizes, and we've just got to end this relationship.
Yeah.
Can't do
And
that.
I don't know if you know, so I became a tenant recently.
Yes.
Because I had a house fire and had to
did.
rent for a year, and I had not rented for, nearly 20 years. And it was actually, I saw it from another perspective, renting.
Yeah.
I didn't like somebody coming into my home every 3 months. So I thought 3 months was excessive.
Yeah.
You have a great report. You see that I keep a nice house. Why are you coming in again at 3 months' time?
Yeah, that's right.
And I actually
Yeah.
found it quite difficult on the way out. So I'm definitely empathetic to the tenants. I think that they can get a really tough deal.
Yeah, and most states now are twice a year, aren't they? As opposed to 3 or 4.
I thought 4 was excessive.
Yeah, 4 is very excessive, I think. But again, in the defence of a landlord that has a questionable tenant, we're then saying a lot can happen in 3 months, can't it?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've had a client recently in Melbourne who, as a landlord, they were having inspections quite regularly, and between one inspection and the next, there was a meth lab.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, so things move pretty quickly in that space.
And they just picked the meth lab up on the inspection?
Yes, well, it was all of a sudden turned into, there was no one obviously living there now by that stage. It was like, it was a full-on drug situation. So,
Wow.
yeah, fast forward 12 months, they've had to re-gut and totally do an internal
Oh my
reno on
gosh.
insurance, of course, but that's a problem. So I get that there needs to be regular inspections, but yeah, I think I'd be content with 2 a year. I think that's fair for the landlord,
Yeah.
and for the tenant. But the rent increase. So and we're probably coming to this conversation because of the change in New South Wales. But the rent increases are now capped at once a year. That's starting. Well, it's already started. So I think that's fine.
Yeah, I have no objections to once a year. I came in thinking it was I thought there was a percentage, but I was incorrect. It's once a year, so that's great.
And we did have a little bit of a yarn off air saying where we need to ensure, I think, and we both do this, but when we're charging rent, we're charging it at market rate.
Yeah.
So that has obviously been put in to say, well, there's rogues out there that just want to gouge the system and charge overs because they can. Okay, and poor tenant that's been renting forever and a day, can't afford to buy a house, is copping all of that. So the rent increase once a year, I think, is great.
Yeah, and it's not easy when, what's New South Wales running at vacancy-wise at the moment? It's less
Well,
than.
most areas you look at, it's 1, maximum 2%.
So when it's 1%, it's extremely hard to find a rental. So
Yeah.
it is. People say, well, they would just leave and find something else. That could be harder than it seems to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you're all of a sudden competing with a whole range of people. Like there's 20s and 30 people at open home inspections for rentals. So
Yeah. So 1 a year we're fine with.
we're fine, yeah. Now, there's a lot of little things in there that like landlords must offer tenants fee-free electronic payment options, so that's all cool. Increased notice periods for fixed-term lease terminations. So a lot of leases are not on a fixed term, aren't they? They're periodic, meaning that they really don't have an end date. They've initially signed this 12-month fixed term maybe.
Yeah.
But then they get to the end of that and I don't know what happens. Like property managers lets it go or the tenant decides, I'm not sure yet, we'll work that out, and it never gets worked out and it just becomes this periodic system where you're in there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that have been in a property for a long term, they don't think about a new lease. They just let it roll over, knowing that they've got a longer notice period to leave once it's in a continuation of lease.
True.
But I'd prefer my tenants to be in a lease, but not if I'm paying that let fee.
No, the reletting fee, to the same tenant. That's a bit of a gouge, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And I think the thing that it's coming in, they've said they will do it in 2025 in New South Wales, which I think is great. And I think this is a really big thing that hurts people is trying to find the bond when you need to move. And so they're going to make they've pledged to say they're going to have a portable bond scheme. And I think for tenants, this is a really big win because finding that 4 weeks plus 2 weeks in advance when you want to move, that can be really difficult.
Yeah.
So to have a portable bond where you just move your bond from one property to the other is going to make it a lot easier for tenants. Now, obviously, there needs to be the relevant checks for landlords to make sure the first landlord is looked after before that happens. But, if everything's in order, I can't see a reason not to do that.
Maybe controversial this, but I've got an issue with the bond structure.
Okay, tell me about that.
Right. So commonly in Australia, it's the bond is equal to 4 weeks of rent. Yeah. So if I'm going to pay $500 a week in rent, my bond might be $2,000.
Yeah.
And I have to pay that up front before I move in, and it goes and sits in a trust account, never to be touched.
With the bond board.
With the bond board, rental tenancy bond, whatever it's called. Both sides of the coin have a problem, I think, because for the landlord, I don't think the bond is enough to cover a problem if they should have to recoup the bond because the tenant's muffed up, right? If that's a word.
Yeah.
Done something wrong or didn't pay and, okay, we need to get them out because that's all a clunky process, might take months, right? And there might be issues in there. We need to claim on insurance, whatever. It's rarely is 4 weeks enough. So that's issue one for the landlord. But over on the other side, for the tenant, asking more than that is also unreasonable because I haven't got $5,000 just to give straight away to sit in an account that no one can touch. Right. So I think there needs to be a restructure of the bond system, right?
So if they put John Pidgeon in charge of the new bonds system, what would it be?
Okay. I'm glad you asked because I've got an answer. We don't want to come to the table whinging and moaning without a solution.
Yeah.
We pay a little bit more each week or each fortnight or each month that is carved off for the bond, right? It's more than 4 weeks, but so you might pay 4 weeks up front, like the standard, but we pay a little bit extra that contributes to a total bond amount that's going to be fair and reasonable for everyone. Now, you get that back should you have an A-grade report when you leave, you get all of that back, right? But you're just building in a little bit extra that you don't have to pay up front, so it's not breaking the bank up front, but it's paid over the first, 6 months of tenancy to add to that total bond amount.
Yeah, okay. I can see that working because if, let's go into the other side. From a protection point of view for the landlord, if someone's done the wrong thing, let's say they've got the dog because you can't say no to a dog.
No.
And the dog has completely ruined the hardwood floors. And we're talking, $10,000. It's a huge amount. But your bond's $2,000. If you know you're going to get your whole bond taken, I'm imagining you're not paying that last 2 weeks' rent.
No.
And it's 2 weeks you've got to be behind before the property manager can act.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not going to be covering it.
No, it's not.
And it can even be less if you knew that you were going to have your bond taken. Why would you pay that last 2 weeks' rent?
Yeah.
So it's not 4 weeks.
No.
It's 2.
That's right, yeah. So, I think that needs an overhaul. I know it's too late because, well, for now, but, we want to maybe look at that.
I like your new strategy. Let's implement that.
All right, maybe we know someone who's got a seat at the table. The poor old dog's getting a run today. So do you agree with the pets thing?
I agree that if I build a home, it's my prerogative of who I want living in there. And if I don't want a dog living in that house because I've got these beautiful hardwood floors, that's my choice.
Yeah.
Now, my dog runs my house. I have the beautiful hardwood floors. And the reason I'm using this example is because my own dog, has ruined my hardwood floors.
Right.
And I'm going to have to get those resurfaced, and it's going to cost a lot more than a bond could ever be.
Okay.
So, and I love that dog, but I feel like my opinion is I should be able to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't think we should not have dogs as tenants though, but I think there's some landlords that should be able to say no.
Can you clip his nails?
He doesn't like it being touched, of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I like the whole pets thing I'm okay with, like in terms of like pets are a companion and all those things. Again, coming back to the good operators of the world, we train our pets and our pets do the right thing. Okay?
Yeah.
Kids can be the same.
Yeah.
If we don't train our kids properly, they can also ruin things.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe with this increased bond that John's going to implement
Yes.
over time, I'd be less inclined to worry about it. But I just think the damage that a pet can do is generally more than the bond.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a fair point. I think there's post-COVID, the tenancy laws around pets have just gone through
changed.
the roof, haven't they? Because of obviously what happened, being so long at home and needing companions and.
But
all
with a
these things.
reference, if somebody came to rent a brand new home of mine and they had a reference where they'd had that dog and the house was in good condition, and I had a reference saying they've kept this dog before and the house was in great condition, I'm more than happy to say yes to them having a dog in my house. I have dogs in my rental properties now. I just think that people should have the choice.
Don't know if they already do this or not, but when you get references, say you're applied to come and live in my rental and you've got previous rental history and from a property manager, it doesn't have to be the same property manager, it could be someone different. Can I look at what your record looks like and the photos on exit, for example?
I don't know. I've only ever asked the questions. So usually the property manager comes and says, here's what the last property manager said. I actually have no idea if you can request that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to find out though.
I'd like to see your form. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you have got a pet and you're saying it's well trained, you look after it and it sleeps, blah, 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 show me the last house that you were in and the exit photos. Now, that might be invasion of privacy. I don't know what's the regulations around that, but I think a due diligence from a property manager, you can then make an informed decision around it.
Yeah, great.
All right, let's take a break and then we'll come back and look at some other states.
Great.
This is Property is brought to you by Sphere Home Loans. Sphere Home Loans is a mortgage broker that helps our listeners all around Australia. So, if you want to get into your first home sooner, looking at upgrading, an additional property, or want your current mortgage reviewed, just search Sphere Home Loans or click the link in the show notes, and their dedicated brokers will be able to help you wherever you are. If you are, however, after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
So good old Vico.
So theirs came in 24, wasn't it? Or was it 25?
I think
24.
It's probably 18 months now or even longer since it's been in play. Yeah.
Because there was a lot of my clients were complaining.
Big changes in Vic.
What were the big ones that they were complaining about?
I think it was the minimum standards in relation to locks on doors, windows, heating and cooling. Old gas heaters had to be removed. So a lot of changes around things that I would call standard and comfortable, right, that should be implemented for tenants, but it was just a big change from what the existing tenancy laws were in Victoria.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. The ones that were probably like ceiling insulation. Right? A lot of homes in the 70s and 80s, no insulation.
My house had no insulation until the fire.
I grew up in a house with no insulation and it was damn cold. So heating systems, cooling systems. So they actually the cooling system hasn't come into effect yet, and this may be something for Victorian landlords, is a cooling system is required at the start of a new lease, and all rental properties must have a fixed cooling system by 30 October 27. So that is 2 and a bit years, isn't it? So we need to think about that and say, right, we need to put some funds away to
What
cover
state's
that. That is Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah. So little things like that. Now, I say to my clients in general, we're putting some money aside each year for repairs and maintenance anyway. I think regardless of what age our house is, unless it's brand new, we're putting some money away for that. So there shouldn't be a shock or a surprise if the hot water system blows up.
Yeah.
Right. We might just add a line item there to say some money for improvements, if you want to call that. Yeah. I.e. the cooling system come October 27. But depending on which state of Australia in which you're living as to how much cooling you need,
Yeah.
you definitely need a whole range of heating apparati in Victoria right now.
Yeah. So I would say Victoria's where I've heard the most noise about that. What do you think has been the main concern?
Just high level, the main concern's been a property's been owner-occupied for the last 20 years, 30 years, and then we buy it off them, which is great because they've looked after it beautifully, but they haven't replaced anything. Everything's working beautifully well. However, it doesn't meet tenancy standards because it's never been rented.
Yep.
So now the property manager comes in and they say, well, we need to do this, this and this. They're putting sticky notes all over the house. There's about 1,800 sticky notes and we need to outlay 10 grand basically to get this place tenanted. Because remember, it's the start of a new lease. So this is a new lease. That needs to be spent before we actually tenant the property. So we're saying to all of our clients, or in our due diligence, we're saying when we're looking through the property to potentially buy, take a property manager with you or reach out to a property manager and say, right, what things might need to be done in that state to get the property tenanted straight away.
You're okay. So if there's somebody already living in the property and it's not a standard, they don't have to bring it up to standard? It's only for a new lease?
A new lease, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So... yeah, and depending on what it is that's failing, a lot of the things as a landlord you want to get done anyway because, like if they haven't got a deadlock on the front door, get it done. Right?
Yeah.
It's safety for the tenant in the area.
But it could be a lot of funds to have to find in one hit.
That's right, yeah. So that's where preparation's power, isn't it? And you're looking at it saying, well, yeah, we know that's going to come into play or we know that the new lease will take effect potentially in 12 months' time. We're starting to put some funds aside for that.
Yeah, great. So there's more increased tenant flexibility in Vic as well that says that they can make modifications to properties. Have you had any noise about that?
Not really. I don't know what those modifications are. Maybe it's putting paintings on walls, and I don't think they can just
change the colour.
I don't think they can do a paint job on it or add another bathroom or anything like that. I don't think I actually haven't looked at the fine print to see what exactly that is, but modifications can be interpreted one of many ways, can't it?
Yeah, and you should be able to put pictures on the walls and those sorts of things. I can't see it being unreasonable to expect that your family picture should be up on the walls of your family home.
No, that's right. And as a tenant, like if they probably had the choice, they would live in their own home that they own.
Yeah.
So you want to allow them the flexibility to make it their own as much as possible.
Yeah.
Without knocking down the back shed because they don't like it, sort of thing. But yeah, within reason, I think that's fair.
Yeah. And the other thing that changed was the rent bidding in Vic. So rent bidding is when they're saying we're advertising this property at $500 a week, but basically if you come in and offer $520 and this person's now offered $540,
Not allowed.
and it goes up and up, it's not allowed. You just have to advertise the rent that you would like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's no-brainer. That should be the case.
Was there a lot of that going on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Heaps. Yeah. And not just by small amounts. We saw it in Sydney a heap where they would walk in and offer $100 a week more, just because they had the cash and they needed someone. They needed to live somewhere. Yeah. So it's definitely a good thing. But again, my argument at the top of the show is, well, if we had enough housing for everyone, we wouldn't be overbidding or overstating what something was worth to rent.
So when you're buying a house, it's fine to go in and offer $100,000 more than the other buyer because you want the property.
Yeah.
But if you really want to rent the property and you're prepared to pay $100 a week more, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're saying.
And you think that's fair and reasonable?
Is that a loaded question?
Yep.
It is, isn't it?
It just seems so different to the way we buy property.
Yeah, well, it's almost like a capitalist approach. It's like, okay, if you want to be a capitalist and go and buy 3 properties and pay $100,000 too much for that property over there, Australian government, we haven't got a problem with you doing that, right? We're capturing our taxes and everything else. On the other hand, don't hurt everyone else at the other end by someone coming in with all the money in their pocket and saying, I'm going to offer $100 a week more in rent over here.
I don't agree with rent bidding. I was just asking
I know you were. Yeah, you got me. Yeah. All right, it's good old Queensland. You've got some properties up that way.
I do. And so with Queensland's very similar to New South Wales with their changes. Obviously, you can only put your the rent up once a year. Again, fair and reasonable. We all think that's normal. The rent bidding.
No rent bidding.
Not allowed. I would never imagine that I would allow my property manager to do a rent bid situation. Before it became law.
Yeah.
And the streamlined bond process again. So they're going to be able to reduce disputes of bond, which obviously is a problem if they're bringing that in.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's going to become an increasing problem as well. The controversy around one clause or one change is the rent in advance.
Tell me about that.
So as a tenant, you can't offer more than 1 month's rent in advance. Right, so I'll read the wording.
Okay, because I have seen that done a lot.
Maximum amount of rent that can be accepted in advance is limited, with 2 weeks' rent being the maximum for periodic agreements, rooming accommodation and movable dwellings, and 1 month's rent for other agreements. Right, so they're saying, right, if you're running an underworld drug company, business, and you need to move some cash on, don't come to us with your 12 months in advance money.
Yeah,
That's how I'm reading it.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of something where I've seen a client of mine do this. So it was there was a divorce situation.
Yes.
And the one of the people had enough money to buy a house but wanted to spend some time in the new area before they bought there. They wanted to rent for 6 months, but he had no income. So he had enough money that he didn't need to work, so he offered 6 months' rent in advance, because how can he verify that he can pay the rent otherwise? He doesn't have a job. They can't verify his pay slips. So he said, well, I'll pay 6 months' rent in advance so you don't have to do my income checks, and then I'll buy a house in the meantime. So he could not do that anymore.
Not in Queensland.
Yeah.
No. All of this is just making it an even playing field.
Yeah, but I guess you see it work in one way, but I guess if people are doing another thing with that, there's obviously a reason they've brought that in.
Correct. And I think it's not your old mate who's renting to buy. It's old mate over here behind the scenes under the world. But, yeah, it's obviously as a result of surveying and polling and what's working and what's not working.
And we need the rules to be for the majority. They can't, these little outliers can't dictate the rules.
No,
it has to be
that's
the
right.
majority.
And I think there are a few that, they may be sitting up in their high seat and haven't really had a good look at what's happening on the ground. But in any case, that's...
I haven't heard any complaints from Queensland. It hasn't been...
No.
I haven't had people say, we're really upset about the changes of Queensland. It's been more New South Wales and Victoria.
Yeah, the no grounds eviction is obviously the big one, which we probably...
And they're going to be very serious about that from what I've heard. It's not going to be, I can just say I'm moving into it.
No.
You need to show and prove that you did.
That's right, which is hard.
Yeah.
Because things change, don't they?
They do.
And the penalties, we'd like to see this actually played out in court when someone actually contests it.
Yeah, we might have to have an update in 12 months and see when these have actually gone into place. What happened in WA? I'm not across WA.
So, again, rent increases every 12 months, no more than one increase a year. Mm-hmm. Yep. Again,
pretty standard.
That's good. Prohibiting the rent bidding, which, again, in line with other states. And then they've mentioned minor modifications to the house. So that's better than knocking down the shed out the back.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the minor modifications are.
I see pets here.
Pets, keeping pets in most cases, yeah. So, so that is... They're going straight to the Commissioner for Consumer Protection around bond releases, pets and minor modifications.
Okay.
Right? So I think, I don't know, I get a feeling that WA does it best in a lot of areas around the country compared to other states. It just seems more logical from what they do. Now, maybe their buying process is not logical because the conveyancer doesn't
That confuses me.
Yeah, but generally, and I'm going there tomorrow, but I just feel that, that's logical. When I'm talking to someone and someone says this is what they do in WA or Perth or whatever, I just get that feeling that they've got a lot of ducks in a row that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I've got really nothing that I can give an example of that, but I think it's so the rent increase we've said, rent bidding we've said, pets. Tenants can now request permission to keep pets with landlords able to impose reasonable conditions. So that there is a win-win.
Reasonable conditions.
Yes.
What are those What does reasonable mean? Because everybody has a different idea of reasonable. Now, if somebody said to me, reasonable is the dog is kept outside, for me that's unreasonable. No. Because I would never want my dog outside.
And I'm sure the Commissioner has a list of reasonable conditions that is say tick or that they would say tick or cross, yeah. Minor modifications, hanging pictures, installing shelves, so they're great.
Yeah.
I don't mind those.
Okay. So they're all quite similar. I mean, obviously Victoria's a bit of an outlier. What do you think are the main things that landlords need to be aware of and cautious of because of these changes?
For me, and especially for the first-time investor listening, for me, it's understanding what the minimum standards are to allow someone to live in that property.
Yeah.
When they're first taking over, if the property hasn't already been tenanted. If it's been tenanted, they still technically might not be compliant because
the lease hasn't
it's the
expired.
end of the lease, right? So the start of the new lease. So, you've just got to ask questions and know that you're meeting minimum standards when you buy that property. And that's in the inspection process.
You're okay.
Not before not once you've bought the property and the tenant's about to move in next week and the property manager's been slack and hasn't been through it, and all of a sudden you realise there's 10 grand of upgrades to be implemented.
Yeah, so I would say more than ever with these changes, especially the no grounds eviction, the quality property manager, making sure you get that quality tenant is important. Yeah. More important than ever, because if you can't just do a no grounds eviction, then they have to be in serious breach before you ask them to leave. So you really those checks are more important than they've ever been. Yeah, no, I agree. But I think everyone, as an investor, we should be aware that there are some standards that need to be met, and the cans and can'ts. And in South Australia, just quickly, the notice period for ending a fixed term tenancy is increased from 28 to 60 days. That's fine.
Tenants vacating before the end of the 60-day notice period may not be liable for rent after vacating in certain circumstances.
Oh, what does that
That is
mean?
an interesting, controversial one.
Tenants vacating before the end of a 60-day notice period may not be liable for the rent after What are the certain circumstances?
Don't know.
Because that's a tricky one. So they can give their 60 days notice, leave after 10 days and then not pay their rent?
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be the back end of that 60 days. Because and I suppose I'm fighting for the tenant here. They might say, right, I've given my 60 days and I'm looking for something else because I want a nicer house or a different location, or I've moved for work, and actually I've got to start work over here within 45 days of that 60-day period. There's 15 days left. Give me some leniency. Now, you'd argue that rent still should be due, but yeah, does that come out of the bond? How does that work? Don't know. Have to look at the fine print on that. And obviously we're in a time restriction in terms of recording, so we can't go into to the weeds of it all, but yeah.
And then they've also got the minimum housing standards like Victoria, which is that the property has to have those standards. So that would be another one if you're buying in South Australia, to look to see that property meets those minimum standards.
Yeah, that's right. And the landlord's reasonable conditions for pets as well, similar to WA, which is good.
Great news for tenants, though, about having pets, because it was, I know in my time in renting when I was younger, there was just never an option to have a pet. So I think it would be great to be able to have pets. I just think there needs to be maybe that extra bond or something to protect the landlord.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you're not moving to South Australia anytime soon because you're still allowed 4 inspections a year.
Excellent.
You are not going to rent in South Australia anytime soon. I think that's overkill.
I actually called my property managers after I had my second inspection when I became a tenant and said, if you're inspecting my property 4 times a year, please stop it. It's an invasion.
Yeah. No, that's a good phone call you made. Yeah, the water charges, we haven't spoken about that. Generally speaking, if you've got metered water and it fits the requirements for
all of those
water safety standards. Yeah,
you've got to have the right taps on.
Yeah, and the right amount of water coming out in a certain time period, then you can on-charge the water usage.
Yes.
Understand, landlords out there, that if you're not meeting the standards, you need to pay for the water usage in a lot of situations.
Yes, or if you don't have separate metered for dual locks.
Yes, correct. So that's something that if I'm a landlord, I'm doing my homework on right now. If I'm about to be a landlord, to know where I'm buying, to understand that, because that can come back to bite you.
Yeah, and that's something I invested in the start in dual locks, of having that separate metered water.
Yeah.
And it's a cost at the start, but it's a long time you're going to have those properties if you can't be on charging water.
You don't want to be paying for someone else's water usage. I wouldn't have thought over the long term, even though it's probably a tax deduction. I don't know, check, but you probably can avoid it. Tassie went through some tenancy law changes similar to when Vic did. Don't know what they are.
So the residential tenancy amendment regulations introduced new primary production residential tenancy agreement for employees living on site as part of their employment contract. Mm-hmm. So they've obviously had some problems with people, bringing people in as part of their contract of tenancy. It's linked to their employment.
Yeah, as a primary producer, which is basically farming, agriculture. Yep.
And what do you think that would be?
I don't know. Reading between the lines, it's hard to say what they would be, but I think there's probably been an element of I'm getting in workers to work for me and it's all a bit grey. You can live on farm, you can work, you don't pay rent or you pay too much rent, or these are your standards that you need to adhere to as part of the employment. It just all becomes a bit muddied.
And is there a bit too much power when someone's your employer and your landlord, and one can be subject to the other?
Yeah.
And people need to be protected from that.
Totally, yeah, no, so we definitely agree with that one. There's minor modifications again, allowing tenants to make those minor mods, which is fine. No problems with that. We both haven't got issues with that, have we?
No.
No. Interesting there with the landlord can still refuse modifications like safety rails, CCTV, or tap or handle changes for accessibility or security. Don't agree with that.
Okay. Why not?
Well, why would, as a landlord, right, if I'm a landlord and you've got a safety issue or a disability, why should I have the right to refuse that?
Yeah.
For you to have a safety rail up the step or CCTV to know who's on my out my front door?
Yeah.
Like that should be not a minimum, but an agreement where we can't refute that. I wouldn't have thought.
No, yeah. I thought you were disagreeing with it.
No, sorry.
No,
No,
I was thinking, why would you disagree with someone
no.
being able to have that?
I'm in tenancy land every day of the week for that.
And this is a good one. So Taz has brought in one where about domestic violence. So tenants who've experienced domestic violence can now end their tenancy without paying a lease fee, a break fee.
Love that.
I think that should be across all states.
No, I agree. And when there's, again, back to the bigger issue, if someone does move out, you're going to replace them pretty quickly.
Especially in the current climate. And I can't see that climate changing in the near future.
Not
We
in
have
the next
so little
5.
vacancy. As the landlords, they do hold a lot of that power when there's little vacancy.
Yeah.
So, if someone's in a domestic violence situation and they need to leave, I think charging them a break fee at that time is pretty heinous.
Yeah, totally. And then there's more support around in that space increasingly, isn't it? So that definitely needs to be honoured. And then last but not least, new Northern Territory. So landlords now prohibited from requiring tenants to pay more than the fixed rent. So that's standard pretty much across the country.
So were they ever able to charge more than the fixed rent?
Well, it's rent bidding. So
okay,
they're
so it's the rent bidding again.
We've advertised at $550. I'm saying I'll pay you $650.
Yeah, but not a lot of changes in the NT.
No, not that are different to other states anyway.
Yeah.
There's nothing that really sticks out. Again, the domestic and family violence is same one, no break fee. That's generally the word on the street up in Northern Territory.
Yeah, while we're talking about domestic violence, can I give a shout out to our charity?
Absolutely. You can.
We are a supporter of Friends with Dignity. They're a national-based charity that help children and women that have been a product of domestic violence, and I just wanted to give them a little shout out. Friends of Dignity.
Yeah, that's great. And are they based locally?
They're nationally based.
National, yeah.
But they just do a lot of things like helping. Like a lot of our funds go towards helping children get into extracurricular activities that have been a subject of domestic violence. So it's just a really good cause.
Yeah, that's great.
So I just want to give them a shout out while we talked about that.
Nice work. We'll put their link in the show notes.
Amazing.
Yeah. All right. Okay, cool. So if you got bored to death today on listening to the different changes, then we apologise. You're probably not listening to me saying this in any case. But I think it was just good because there's so much wind and noise out there about my landlord's doing this and it's hard for tenants and all these things. And it absolutely, the end of the day, we as human beings need to act with ethically and morally and try and make it fair and reasonable for everyone. Have the government in each state done that? In certain instances, we might disagree and say, no, they haven't. But the law's the laws now. I know there's some lobbying going on to try and overturn some of that, definitely in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Don't know what will come of that, but...
And I think when you and I talk about these laws and I might say I've got a problem with this or that, we look at it from the lens of a good human being that does the right thing.
Yes.
And I think these laws need to be in place for the people, or even if it's only the few, that don't do the right thing. So even though I might think, that's unreasonable, you've got to think there's people doing the wrong thing that need these laws in place, and we'd hate to see anyone doing the wrong thing.
And unfortunately, most rules are put in place because of that 2%, aren't they?
Yeah.
Seems outrageous, but It is what it is.
Yeah, but as long as everybody understands the changes, then you can't get caught out. And a good property manager.
That's what it comes back to, Rach. It's getting that good property manager that can choose a good, reliable, honest tenant that's going to do the right thing by the home that they're living in. And I think whether we're renting, and I rented for 20 years, we need to treat it as though it's our own anyway. So
Absolutely.
All right. If someone needs to get some lending, where are they going to?
Sphere Home Loans.
Yeah, and the link will be in the show notes for that. And you'll offer a free call and a bit of a quick yarn to see some of the situations.
You can ask for me too if you'd like to have a chat with me. I think more people after I've been asked for the hosting the podcast have asked if they can have a catch up with me. So I'm always happy to have a catch up. So feel free to ask.
You are.
And I hear that you're doing a few calls at the moment too.
Well, before you get on to me, I gave out your personal number the other day, didn't I?
You did. Thank you for that. Thank you. I love a Saturday call on my personal phone.
Yeah, really. No, that was a bad move by me. I just looked
I'm
through
just
my
joking.
phone,
It was
I
a
saw
text.
Rach and I was like, yeah, that one. Ended up was a personal number. So any case.
The bat phone, as we call it.
The bat phone, yes. Yeah, well, my client messaged me. He's like, oh, I think I rang the wrong number. Any case. Yeah, so we'll put link to the show note. We'll put a link to your site in the show notes. And if anyone wants some buyer's agent work or a clarity call or whatever it is, then just reach out. You know where to find us?
Where do they find you?
Well, envisageproperty.com.au. If you want a clarity call, you can jump on there or our website, solvairwealth.com.au.
Yeah, I think the clarity calls are such a must in the current climate.
I will say there's a little bit of a lag on those. You probably maybe 2 weeks in advance if you want to.
I think people would wait 2 weeks for a clarity call.
Some aren't. But anyways, maybe it's the June 30 deadline. But
amazing.
All right, good chat. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Any information given in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and you should seek your own property advice before acting on anything you may hear in this podcast. If you want to start or advance your property education journey, John Pidgeon's book, Sort Your Property Out and Build Your Future, is available where all good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective license holders.